Hello, it's Michelle with Books Cause Insomnia. I'm here today to do my July wrap-up, but I wanted to start out by mentioning a book that I somehow completely forgot to mention in my June wrap-up, which is The Children on the Hill by Jennifer McMahon. This book was inspired by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and it takes place in 1978 with a doctor, Helen Hildreth, who is a doctor at a mental hospital, and she's raising her two grandchildren, and then she brings a third child into the house. And then it also takes place now with a podcaster who is one of the two girls from the 1978 storyline. That's really all I want to say about the book, because I think it's better to walk into this one a little bit blind. I thought this was a really fun book, and when I was reading it, somebody went into, I think it was Walmart or somewhere, and on Instagram said, "Oh my gosh, they already are putting out Halloween stuff in June." And I thought, really? And they said, "It's too early, isn't it?" And I thought, for pumpkins? No, it's not too early for me. I love Halloween. So for me, it's not too early. I am ready for Halloween. And I was reading this book at the time. I was listening to it on audiobook, and I thought, you know what? I've heard of Summerween. That's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is at least 2 Halloween or scary books every month until Halloween. Maybe forever. That's what I want. I just want Halloween or scary, gothic, horror, something like that, all the way through. And like I said, maybe forever, because I'm just really here for that. That's just kind of my thing. It feels right to me. And this book just really helped inspire that. And so I started doing just that in July, and I'm going to keep doing it. I don't have a name for it. If you have any ideas, let me know. But it did inspire that. Just that feeling of wanting to read horror or creepy or different. And it doesn't have to be books that have pumpkins on the cover, or even necessarily books that are said to be in the horror genre or anything like that. Just books that to me feel kind of Halloweenish. I had so much fun reading this book though, or listening to it. It really had me thinking about, what is a monster? And who's the real monster? Is it the doctor or is it the patient? And I have an answer to that question. I'm not going to answer that right now in this video, because I'm planning on anyway, reading Frankenstein at some point, and I think I'm going to delve deeper into that after reading that book. Maybe I'll do a totally separate video on it and talk deeper about that at the time. What really makes a monster? I can think of a few people I've met in my life that I think might have been monsters. In my mind, they are, and they always will be. They'll always be, yeah, monsters. And there might be people that think I'm a monster. Maybe I'm infamous in their mind as one, right? And maybe you are. What makes a monster? And I just thought this book was so adventurous and fun. There was so many twists in this book. There was maybe 3. 2 of them were pretty big that I did not, one I saw coming, 2 of them I did not see coming, and one of them was shocking with a capital S. I was shook. I really was. And I'm kind of hoping for a sequel, and I wouldn't be mad if this was made into a movie. I really wouldn't be. Although, would it be as good as it was in my mind? Probably not. But I loved this book. I really did. I love Jennifer McMahon. She just hits the notes in ways that a lot of authors don't. And bravo. She just did the best job. I give this book 5 stars. The next audiobook that I read or listened to was The Molecule of More How a single chemical in your brain drives love, sex, and creativity and will determine the fate of the human race, by Daniel Z. Lieberman. The chemical is dopamine. I was a psych major in college, and, well, among other things, I changed my major a handful of times. And I really kind of nerd out when it comes to neurochemistry. It's just really fascinating to me. I could probably read a book every month of the year on this subject. It's just very fascinating to me. I think it's a decent book. I thought it was pretty fascinating. He very lightly touched on dopamine, and it was in a way that I think is very easy for people to read and understand. It didn't really go deep enough into the different aspects of dopamine and maybe the neurotransmitters in the way that I was wanting it to, or the different parts of the brain and how they come into play with dopamine, or maybe how some of the other chemicals of the brain might interact with it. Like I said, I really nerd out with this stuff, so I thought it was a good book. It was interesting. It was just so vague in so many ways, but it was still interesting. And I think if you're interested on this subject, you would probably really like the book. I do give it 3 stars. My naked book of the month selection is You're Invited. I don't know where I put the cover. As I keep mentioning, I've been very forgetful lately. In this book, the main character's ex-boyfriend is marrying her childhood best friend, and she ends up being accused of her murder. That's the short and sweet version of what this book is about. It does take place in Sri Lanka. It is a psychological thriller. I found it very entertaining. It did hold my interest. Just to mention this here, you know how I don't really like the like self-harm, or especially the sexual self-harm. That starts out very quickly in the book, and I almost put it down. I did look into why that was there, and it's there to help the reader understand the protagonist and why she is into self-harm and why she's into being okay with other people harming her. So there is a point to it being there, and it's not real graphic. So I decided to keep reading. I'm glad I did, because I did enjoy the book, and it was just that one reference to it. It didn't keep going and going and going or anything. And the book was well written beyond that. I didn't think the storyline sucked or anything. I didn't think that it was just thrown in there for some kind of shock value or anything like that. I really enjoy a murder mystery that is around a wedding, because I love, or funerals even for that matter, I love the heightened emotions that are around such events in life. In this book, the timelines are all over the place. The security, they are investigating what happened to the bride. She has disappeared. They think that foul play is involved, and they're interviewing a bunch of people. And that's when the protagonist gets accused of doing something to her. And so we're reading a lot of the interviews, and I like that kind of stuff. Now, if you don't like reading a bunch of interviews and the timeline kind of moving around like it does in some books, this might not be the book for you, but I really liked it. I also really enjoyed reading about the culture in Sri Lanka. I thought that was very fascinating. I didn't care for the ending, though. The wrap-up I just found kind of, So because of that, and just a few other little elements of it that were just kind of fell flat for me, I give the book 3 stars. But if you do like a wedding mystery and you like psychological thrillers, I do recommend it though. Yeah. Sorry about my hair. I just got a cut and I'm trying to get used to all these layers. And so when I try to put it up, it keeps falling out and I'm trying to get adjusted to it. Then I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in the Thrill a Month book club with AJ Dunn. This book was very interesting to me. The book club as a whole was very mixed on thoughts on this book. Some people really loved it. Some people thought it was okay. And some people didn't like it. I would say overall, most people really loved it. I was one of the people that thought it was okay. I just didn't care for the writing very much. I found it to be very dull and bland. Around page 50, I was ready to DNF it. And I did ask if the group felt that I should DNF it at that point. Because usually 50 pages in, if I am not enjoying a book, if I'm not feeling entertained, I'm done. But I was told that I should keep going. There was some shockers coming, and they felt that I should keep reading. So I decided to keep reading, and I'm glad I did. I did enjoy the book. As I kept reading, the momentum started building, and as I read, it kept getting more and more interesting and intense. I liked the character development on some of the characters. I was surprised that Nurse Ratched, is such a known popular character, because I found her to not be all that scary or interesting. I thought she was kind of bleak and dull. I didn't see this, ooh, Nurse Ratched, this creepy, scary character that is so in your face. I just didn't feel that way about her. And so the way that she's been portrayed in other movies and shows and such since is very interesting, because I didn't see what other people maybe saw or read when I read it. I found her kind of boring, and I actually found one of the other characters to be quite a bit more sinister and threatening. And in that sense, it was a thriller. Now, in a lot of ways, it didn't quite seem like a thriller, but then the ending really made it feel like a thriller. And there was a twist that I wasn't seeing, and a shock at the end. And I do recommend reading it. I think especially if someone is a writer, this is a book worth reading. Just one, because of the character development aspect, and two, because of the twist at the end. It's kind of nice to see this kind of storyline where one just doesn't see a character doing what this character did, or doesn't see a storyline going the direction that this one went in. And some of the other characters didn't quite do what I thought they would do. And I understand they were in a psychiatric ward, but still, it was just a little bit different. The next book that I listened to was More Than You'll Ever Know by Katie Gutierrez. This was the book I was talking about in my TBR video about the woman that has two husbands. I did try to read it. It was really more, to me, more of a family drama than a thriller, or at least that's sure how it felt. I was 2.5 hours into the book, and I finally decided to DNF it. It was really, really slow. Not in a slow burn way, but in a drawn out, why are we mentioning all this kind of way. And it just felt like the author was trying to read a page quota as opposed to mentioning things because they pushed the storyline forward. They kept mentioning a recession that happened in Texas in the 80s, I think it was, which I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying it's not a part of history. But what I am saying is right now, I don't really want to read about a recession. I know that sounds really heartless, but I'm just being honest. I'm so tired of hearing about recessions every time I turn on the news or look at my budget or whatever, that I don't really want to read about them right now, if I'm honest. It's just a little bit too much. That's not entertainment for me. Maybe in a few years I won't feel that way, but right now it's just not my idea of fun. Also, so I don't speak Spanish and I've never learned Spanish. And trying to listen to this book as an audiobook, I got overwhelmed very quickly because there's a lot of Spanish words and phrases. And since I don't speak Spanish, I had no idea what she was talking about or what she was saying a lot. And if I was reading a physical book, I could just stop and look it up. But when somebody's speaking, I don't know, not only do I not know what's being said, but it's a lot harder to stop and pause it and rewind, and I don't know what the spelling of words is or anything to where I could even begin to look it up. But I wasn't that interested in reading it to where I would want to do that. Like if it was a research project or it was, for example, when I do genealogy, and a big chunk of my genealogy that I've done is with my family in Finland. Okay, I will take the time to actually find out what all these different words mean and translate and figure it out, but I'm probably not going to do that with a pleasure read. I'm not that interested in knowing what words or phrases in other languages mean on a pleasure read, you know? And so, yeah, I got really overwhelmed with it because it was kind of a lot. Okay, I have had a lot of interest in, I guess it started a couple years ago. I got that Halloween, it's right behind where you're sitting. So Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell I got, and I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to start getting into graphic novels. I've got a stack of them on my TBR shelf, but lately I've been really wanting to actually not just have them on my TBR shelf for when I play my TBR game, but actually read them. And when I feel like it, as opposed to when they come up in the game. And I wanted to also expand into manga. And my husband and I went on a date night. Oh, I guess it was a week or 2 weeks ago now. We went to dinner, and then we went to Barnes & Noble, got some coffee, went home. It was just kind of to me, that's one of my favorite date nights, is dinner and Barnes & Noble and coffee. And we ended up spending the whole time in the graphic novel / manga section. And we had a really good time. And I ended up getting this book here, SINoALICE #1. And this is by Takuto Aoki. And I thought this cover was really pretty. And it says, everything about Alice, her family, her friends, her life, even her crush, is ordinary. No wonderland to see here, but lately her dreams have been anything but normal. While asleep, she finds herself interrogated by 2 creepy marionettes, their glass eyes peering into the darkest corners of her heart. What is your desire? What is it you wish to visit upon the world? Try as she might to ignore the dreams, Alice is drawn into their violent, twisted universe. As greed and desire begin to warp the ordinary reality she knows, Alice is thrust into a dark game of slaughter made for fairy tale heroines who will stop at nothing to bring their creators back to life. And this is based on a mobile RPG game. I thought, well, that could be really fun. If I like the book, I could start playing the game. It could be this whole thing, right? Get the t-shirt. Who knows? But, so when I went to read this book, the first morning of her life, I thought was really fun. The marionettes were a little well, I didn't get a whole lot of exposure to them, so I wasn't really sure what to think of that. But she got up, her mom was making breakfast. There's this adorable cat here in her world. She goes to school. I was really enjoying that. And then as her life and her day progressed, I started kind of feeling confused. I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. And apparently, that's how things go. There was a lot of sexual references and then a lot of violent references, but I wasn't sure what was real and what wasn't. And I just wasn't sure what was actually going on. And I think that's how this story is. And I don't know if we're supposed to guess what really happened or what didn't. But the violent scene went on for so long. And then I wasn't even sure how it ended up. It really kind of fell flat for me. So I think her fantasies were supposed to come true, but I wasn't sure if they did. I just don't think this is the story or the series for me. So I did end up giving it 2 stars. And I'm on the hunt for a manga series that is a little more my style. But if you have any manga that you recommend, let me know. Or graphic novels for that matter. Okay, the next book that I read was When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. This was another audiobook for me. A haunting novel about a Black woman who returns to her hometown for a plantation wedding and the horror that ensues as she reconnects with the blood-soaked history of the land and the best friends she left behind. It's grotesque. It's very hard to stomach different parts of this book. It's very uncomfortable to read. It is a part of our history, though, and I think it's definitely worth a read if you like historical fiction, especially if you want to learn more about actual history. I thought it was a good book. There was certain things that I really wanted to know a little bit more about, and there was... Here I am again. I don't want to give anything away. There was certain things that I was hoping to know more about with the characters and maybe their backstories or why different things were happening that I felt were missing. And then once again, the ending was a little bit... There was some shockers in there, but the ending was a little flat for me. Just the way it felt, like it was very like, and we're done. It was like, wait, what? What happened? Okay. So I give this one 3.5 stars. And I'm going to leave it at 3.5. I'm not going to round it up to 4 because I think 4 is misleading. It makes it sound like I loved it as opposed to just liked it. I did like it and I do recommend it. I just feel like there's a little bit... I feel like when it was edited... I have a hard time with that word. There were things taken out that I wanted to stay in there. It was like the last book, they left too much in. This one, they took too much out and threw it on the floor. I wanted to know more about certain things. And then I saved the best for last. Yep, I'm Vanessa Williams right now. I did. I went and saved the best for last. And this was my... I guess you could definitely say the last book was part of my Halloween in July, but this one is as well. This is Ungodly by Braedon Riddick. I had a hard time getting into this book, not because of why you're thinking though. I had some in-laws come to town and they were visiting and we were spending so much time with them that I didn't really have time to sit down and read. So it wasn't that I had a hard time getting into it, enjoying it. It was that I had a hard time actually getting into it. But this is probably one of the best opening lines I've ever seen in my life. It is. I'm going to be reading to you a little bit here today. You're a murderous bitch, Eldam Apjaw said. Don't hide who you are. What? I love that. Like... Yeah, that's one way to get me to not want to put a book down. What did you just say? That's amazing. That is such a good opening line. I love it. I had so many different passages of this book underlined. I have so many different moments of this book that I loved. This is another book that I will not be giving away because I want to read it again and I want to come back to different parts of this book at different times. I don't really want to tell you what this book is about because I think that most people that read this book will walk away and have a different explanation of what it's about. And that's the beauty of it. What's it about? I don't know. You tell me. Well, we will probably have different descriptions of that. How amazing is that? How many books could you say that about? What I will say is, when you start reading this book, because I bet you're going to want to go get a copy, right? If you read this book, you're going to see that in the beginning that there's quite a few different characters, and you might think, wow, how many characters are there? But there's a reason, and it all comes together at a certain point, and you'll understand why. And it doesn't keep doing that. The author does not keep throwing more and more characters at you. It's just in the beginning. This book got into my head a little bit. One of the nights that I was reading it, I got up for a quick bathroom break in the middle of the night. You know how that goes. A lot of us like to drink water right before we go to bed. I'm one of those people. I got up and my bathroom that I like to use in the middle of the night is right around the corner from my bedroom. I know it sounds weird, but it's actually closer than the bathroom in the bedroom. I went around the corner and I was kind of dazed, and I opened my eyes and I saw a figure on the balcony, and I thought, ugh. And it looked like the figure that I pictured in this book at a certain point. And I went like this, and it wasn't a figure, it was a tree off in the distance. And that's when I realized that this book was in my head. In my head. When a book gets in my head like that, I know that I'm in love with the book. I know that I will not get rid of the book, and I will probably read it multiple times in my life. This author is a very deep thinker, and I love that about him. He really pays attention to people, and I can tell that he does because of the way that he writes people. One of the characters in this book who I got very attached to is actually me in a lot of ways, and it was kind of creepy because I felt like the author knows me, and I'm wondering how he got into my mind. I mean, it's like he understands women and or me in a way that most people don't. It was a little disconcerting, if I'm honest with you. But I felt very attached to this character. And her name was Amanda. There was another character in here that I got very attached to named Brian. The characters and who they are and the dynamic of these characters and how they feel, it just goes so far beyond what so many authors do with their characters. So many characters just feel so one-dimensional, and these characters just feel like real people to me. I wanted to read you a passage of this book just to show you how vulnerable the writing of this book is. Sometime between walking and walking, Brian drifted into a state of melancholia, where his point of view took on a morose, introspective tilt. This tended to happen whenever he failed to succumb to sleep after a drinking binge. It wasn't a good place to be, because more often than not, his mother haunted this place. Legally speaking, she still walked among the living, but he lost the essence of his mother in the car accident. Not in the collision, for it had been a very slow speed, but in the aftermath, in the passage of time and the prescription of pills. At that fabled point of no return, when the brain could no longer distinguish the two types of pain, the phantom from the real. Were there those who believed he should feel blessed that his mother was still alive? Of course. Should he feel blessed? Certainly. He should feel blessed that his mother chased the string of pen-happy doctors who dealt out addiction with impunity. Blessed because her first 3 doses hadn't finished her off, knowing the knockout haymaker was inevitable in the coming rounds, looming to lay her down for the count. Blessed because he'd yet to face himself in the mirror while adjusting the tie he'd wear to watch his mother get buried. Blessed for having witnessed his mother's downward spiral to a pill-out oblivion. Blessed for the riptide of conflicting feelings therefrom, for the crippling understanding that he was the enabler, knowing he should have done something, knowing he'd done nothing, other than sit back and watch her ride the spiral past the point of no return. I have goosebumps. I don't know if you can see them, but I do. I love this book. I thought it was beautiful. It was scary. It was haunting. It was adventurous. It was amazing. And it reminded me of one of my favorite movies in a certain way, but I don't want to spoil it because I want you to read it and tell me if you know what movie it was. I give it 5 stars. Just wanted to tell you, since you've been here this long, I'm not going to be doing a TBR video this month. I've been feeling like kind of a loser lately because I just can't get through all of my TBR books. And I don't always want to, if I'm honest with you. I really want to go back to the days of just wanting to read a book and picking it up. And maybe having in mind that I want to read certain books, but only reading them because I want to. I feel so weighed down by a stack of books that I have to read each month. And I never did do that until I started BookTube. And it's almost I feel like there's so much pressure that I'm putting on myself. I mean, you're not putting any pressure on me. I'm doing this to myself. And it's like, this is a fun hobby that I have here. And I'm making it this like stressful thing for no reason. I don't want to keep doing that to myself, stressing myself out for no reason. I think I'm going to try not doing a TBR video and just going with the flow and telling you what I read after the fact and seeing how that goes. I have a few fun ideas for how I might stumble upon my next book, and I might film those, and we'll see how that goes, and maybe that will help keep me a little bit more excited and a little bit less weighted. If you have read any of these books, let me know, and let me know what you thought of them. If you want to read any of these books, let me know. If you have been having a hard time reading all the books you want to read this summer, let me know. Is it just me? Like, I feel like I have an easier time reading everything in the winter and the fall and even the spring, but the summer, I know so many people talk about how they read more in the summer, and I'm thinking, really? I don't know. I feel like I'm out doing stuff, and I have a harder time reading. But then again, the fall and the winter, I'm out doing stuff too, so I don't know. We all have 24 hours in the day, and maybe I'm just not making time. I guess I'm not, but I think that's why at 50 pages in, I DNF books, though, if I'm not enjoying them, usually, because there's so many books and so little time in life to actually read them all. Like, I know it's impossible to read all the books I'm going to want to read in my lifetime, because I'm not going to there's no way I could possibly live long enough to read every book I want to read. Life just doesn't go that long. Especially when I want to reread books too. Oh, the woes of loving books, right? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night. Happy reading. Bye.